Have you ever wondered why being kind still leaves you feeling exhausted, unseen, or quietly angry? Why doing everything right somehow keeps putting you last? If this question stings, it's because it's touching something real, something you felt but never had words for. You try to be good, you try to be patient, you try to understand everyone else. And yet at the end of the day, there's a hollow feeling you can't explain. Like you're giving pieces of yourself away and no one notices they're gone. You were taught that kindness is the safest way to live, that being nice will protect you, that if you're generous enough, people will meet you with the same care. So you learn to listen more than you speak, to forgive quickly, to stay quiet when something hurts. You told yourself it was maturity, strength, love, but deep down something started to feel off. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. At first it felt good to be needed, to be the reliable one, the understanding one, the one people turn to when they need support. You felt valuable, important, like your presence mattered. But over time, the weight grew. Requests stopped feeling like requests. Expectations replaced gratitude. And the space where your needs once lived became smaller and smaller. You started explaining yourself even when you didn't need to, apologizing when you hadn't done anything wrong, saying yes while your body whispered no. You told yourself it wasn't a big deal, that you could handle it, that this is just what good people do. But your energy drained faster, your patience thinned, and that quiet resentment you hated admitting to began to take root. Here's the part no one warned you about. Kindness doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it makes you invisible. Not because you lack value, but because you never demand to be seen. When you always give, people stop noticing the cost. When you always understand, people stop explaining themselves to you. And when you never draw a line, others decide where you end. This isn't about becoming cold, or selfish, or hard. It's about noticing the pattern you were never taught to question. The pattern where your worth feels tied to how useful you are. Where love feels conditional on how much you tolerate. Where walking away feels cruel, even when staying is slowly breaking you. You might feel this most at night, when everything goes quiet. When there's no one left to help, no one left to please. Just you, tired, overthinking, wondering why you feel so alone despite being surrounded by people. Wondering why kindness, the thing you were praised for, now feels like a trap you can't escape. But here's the truth hiding beneath all of this. There is nothing wrong with you. You weren't too weak. You weren't naive. You were simply taught a version of kindness that forgot to include you. And the moment you see that, something shifts. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough to change the direction of your life. Because kindness was never meant to cost you your voice. It was never meant to erase your needs. It was never meant to teach you that love requires self-sacrifice without limits. There is another way to live. A way where your kindness doesn't drain you but grounds you, where giving doesn't feel like disappearing, where respect starts inside you, not outside. If you stay here, if you let these words sink in, you'll begin to see what was hidden in plain sight. Not a reason to harden your heart, but a reason to finally protect it. Not an excuse to stop caring, but permission to care without losing yourself. And once you understand this, truly understand it, you'll never see your kindness the same way again. That understanding doesn't come gently. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how often you shrink to keep peace, how often you swallow truth to avoid tension, how often your silence is mistaken for agreement. This awareness sharpens everything. Conversations feel heavier. Small mom. Ints feel louder. You realize how much of your life has been shaped by fear disguised as kindness. You begin to feel the urgency in your chest. Not panic. Clarity. The kind that tells you time is not unlimited. Every moment you delay choosing yourself reinforces the old story. The story where you are last. The story where your needs are optional. And the longer you stay in that place, the more expensive it becomes to leave. Your body has been trying to tell you this all along. The exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. The tension that never fully releases. The sudden irritation at small things. These are not flaws, they are signals. Warnings that you've been carrying weight that was never meant to be yours. Kindness was supposed to connect you, not consume you. What makes this so dangerous is how normal it feels. Being too kind doesn't look like a crisis. It looks like responsibility, reliability, being the bigger person. And that's why it lasts so long. Because no one stops you, no one pulls you aside and says you're disappearing. They benefit too much from your silence. But there comes a point where staying the same becomes more painful than changing. Where the cost of being liked outweighs the cost of being honest. Where you feel a quiet refusal rise inside you, not anger, resolve. A decision that you can no longer afford to live half present in your own life. This is where fear shows up. Fear of disappointing others, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being called selfish for doing what you were never taught to do. The fear is real, but so is the damage of ignoring yourself. And one of these fears will shape your future. The other will fade once you move through it. You don't need to become louder to be stronger. You don't need to harden your heart. You need alignment. Words that match your values, actions that match your truth, boundaries that are not punishments but protections. This is how kindness evolves instead of breaks you. The moment you start honoring yourself, the world reacts. Some people push back, some test you, some reveal who they really are. This is not failure, this is clarity. This is the sorting that kindness alone could never do. And it hurts because loss always hurts, even when it's necessary. But something else happens too. Your energy returns in small flashes. You breathe deeper. You stop rehearsing conversations that never needed to happen. You feel present in your own skin again. Not because life suddenly got easier, but because you stop fighting yourself to keep others comfortable. This is the turning point. Not dramatic, not perfect, just honest. You begin choosing yourself in quiet ways. You pause before agreeing. You let discomfort exist without rushing to fix it. You allow people to feel their feelings without taking responsibility for them. These moments seem small, but they change everything. Because each time you choose self-respect, you teach the world how to treat you. Each time you honor your limits. Why? Rebuild trust with yourself. And that trust becomes the foundation for a different kind of strength. One that doesn't seek approval. One that doesn't need permission. You were never meant to disappear in the name of being good. You were meant to live fully, speak clearly, and give from a place of choice, not obligation. The kindness that survives this transformation is deeper, steadier, and impossible to exploit. It is no longer a weakness waiting to be taken advantage of. It is a force that begins with you. That force doesn't announce itself loudly. It grows in the quiet moments when you choose not to betray yourself. When you stop explaining what doesn't need defending. When you let silence replace overgiving. This is where real change begins. Not in grand declarations, but in the small, steady refusal to abandon yourself again. You start to feel the difference immediately, not comfort, strength, a grounded weight in your chest that wasn't there before. It feels unfamiliar because you've spent so long leaning outward, supporting, adjusting, carrying. Now you're standing upright, and it demands something from you: presence, courage, ownership. The old habits will try to pull you back, the urge to fix, to smooth things over, to take responsibility for emotions that were never yours. This is the test, not whether you care, but whether you respect yourself enough to stop proving it. Because you don't need to earn the right to exist fully. There will be moments when your voice shakes, when your boundaries feel clumsy, when you second-guess everything. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're doing something new. Growth is uncomfortable because it asks you to release identities that once kept you safe. Even when they were slowly destroying you, you begin to see how much of your life was built around avoiding rejection. How often you chose peace over truth. How often you mistook endurance for love. This realization cuts deep, but it also frees you. Because once you see the pattern, you're no longer trapped inside it. What replaces it is not hardness, it's clarity. You stop overextending, you stop chasing validation, you stop needing everyone to understand you. And in that space, something powerful takes root. Self-trust, the kind that doesn't collapse under pressure, the kind that doesn't disappear when challenged. The world responds differently to someone who knows where they stand. Not everyone likes it. Some people will push harder. Some will accuse you of changing. They're right. You are. You're no longer available for relationships that only work when you disappear. And that shift is irreversible. You begin to attract a different energy. Conversations feel cleaner. Connections feel mutual. Respect replaces obligation. And for the first time, kindness feels like a choice instead of a reflex. Something you offer freely, not something that drains you dry. This is the moment most people never reach. They feel the discomfort and too are in back. They choose familiar pain over unfamiliar strength. But you're still here, which means something inside you knows there's more. More than survival. More than being tolerated. More than being praised for how much you endure. You weren't meant to live as a background presence in your own life. You were meant to take up space, to be felt, to be real. And that requires a decision that can't be postponed forever. Because every day you delay, the cost compounds, the exhaustion deepens, the resentment hardens. There is urgency here for a reason, not fear, truth. Time will move whether you change or not. People will take what you allow them to take. Patterns will repeat until you interrupt them, and no one is coming to do that for you. This is where you step forward. Not loudly, not aggressively, but firmly, with the understanding that your kindness is no longer unconditional access. It is a reflection of your values, and it begins with how you treat yourself when you choose that. So, anything extraordinary happens. You stop living on borrowed energy. You stop performing goodness. You start living in alignment, and alignment creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates freedom. This is not about becoming someone else. It's about returning to who you were before you learned to disappear, before you believed love required sacrifice without limits, before you confused being needed with being valued. You were still kind, but now your kindness has a backbone, and that changes everything. That backbone will be tested, not once, but repeatedly, in small moments where it would be easier to give in conversations where silence feels safer than truth. This is where everything you've realized either becomes real or fades back into memory, because insight alone changes nothing. Action does. You'll notice the pull immediately. The old reflex to over-explain, to soften your words so no one feels uncomfortable, to rush in and fix what was never yours to carry. This is the edge, the place where growth asks for proof. And every time you resist the urge to disappear, you reclaim a piece of yourself. This isn't about confrontation, it's about presence. Standing steady without performing, letting people react without managing the outcome, allowing discomfort to exist without rushing to erase it. These moments feel intense because they go against everything you were conditioned to do. But intensity is the price of change. What you're really breaking is a contract you never agreed to consciously. The contract that said your worth depended on how much you give. The contract that rewarded silence and punished honesty. The contract that taught you to trade authenticity for acceptance. Tearing that up feels terrifying and freeing. As you hold your ground, you'll see clearly who respects you and who only respected your compliance. This clarity hurts, but it also saves you years of quiet resentment. Because the truth is simple, anyone who benefits from you having no boundaries will resist you building them. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your nervous system will need time to adjust. Strength can feel like danger when you're used to survival. You may feel guilt even when you've done nothing wrong. You may feel selfish for choosing balance. These feelings are echoes, not warnings. They fade as your actions reinforce a new identity, and that identity changes how you move through the world. You stop chasing approval. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop measuring your worth by how much you're needed. Instead, you start listening to yourself, trusting your instincts, acting from alignment rather than fear. This shift doesn't make life perfect, it makes it honest. You still care deeply, you still give generously, but now it's intentional, now it's grounded, now it doesn't leave you empty. You give because you want to, not because you're afraid of losing connection. People notice, not because you announce it, but because your energy is different. You speak with calm certainty, you don't rush, you don't beg, you don't overextend, and that presence commands a level of respect kindness alone never could. This is the version of you that was always there, buried under years of conditioning, years of praise for being easy, years of rewards for being quiet. You didn't lose yourself. You learned to hide. And now you're choosing to come back. There is power in this moment. Because once you see the cost of being too kind to everyone but yourself, you can never go back to not knowing. Every choice from here on out either honors your growth or reinforces the old pattern. And that choice is always in your hands. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You don't need to wait until you're ready. Readiness comes from action, not the other way around. The life you want doesn't begin when others understand you. It begins when you understand yourself. This is where kindness becomes something entirely. Not a weakness, not a mask, not a sacrifice, but a strength rooted in self-respect, a strength that can't be exploited. A strength that doesn't fade when tested. You were never meant to burn yourself out to keep others warm. You were meant to live fully, firmly, and freely. And the moment you stop abandoning yourself, everything you've been searching for starts to align. You're not here to survive quietly anymore. You're here to live with a presence that cannot be ignored. That presence doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being aligned. When your actions match your truth, you become unshakable. You become someone who doesn't need permission to exist fully. And that is a kind of power that changes everything. This is where the stakes rise. Because once you taste that freedom, you can't pretend the old life was enough. You can't ignore the cost you paid for being good. You can't go back to being a person who gives until there's nothing left. You can't go back to apologizing for taking up space. The truth doesn't allow you to return to the lie. The world will test you. It always does when someone starts setting boundaries. Some people will accuse you of changing. Some will say you're selfish. Some will act like you're the problem because you're no longer easy to use. That reaction is not a sign you're wrong. It's proof you're breaking a pattern that benefited them. You may feel fear. You may feel doubt. You may feel the urge to retreat into old habits. That urge is loud because it's familiar. It's the voice of survival. But survival is not the same as thriving. You are not here to simply get through life. You are here to build a life that respects you. And this is where the urgency becomes real, because every day you delay, you reinforce the old wiring. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you teach your nervous system that your voice doesn't matter. Every time you sacrifice your needs for someone else's comfort, you cement the belief that you are only valuable when you're giving. You don't have to wait for a moment of crisis to change. You don't have to wait until you're broken. You don't have to wait until you can't take it anymore. The change begins in the small decisions you make right now. In the way you speak to yourself, in the way you refuse to take the bait, in the way you let your boundaries stand without apology. Because boundaries are not a wall, they are a declaration, a statement that your life matters, a statement that your energy is not disposable, a statement that you will not be used as a safety net for people who never learn how to stand on their own. When you start living this way, you'll notice something unexpected. People who truly belong in your life will rise to the surface. They will respect you, they will meet you halfway. They will not demand you disappear for them. They will not guilt you into compliance. They will not treat your kindness as a weakness. And the people who don't belong will reveal themselves, not through drama, through distance, through discomfort, through the subtle shift in how they treat you. That revelation is painful, yes, but it is also a gift, because you are no longer wasting your life on relationships that only exist when you're giving. You are reclaiming your time, your energy, your peace, your right to be whole. You are proving to yourself that you are not defined by how much you can endure. You are defined by what you are willing to protect. This is the moment where you become the person you've been waiting for. Not the person you thought you needed to be loved. Not the person you performed to keep peace. The real you, the you that has boundaries. The you that chooses kindness without losing yourself. The you that stands firm without becoming cruel. Your kindness is not the problem. Your silence is. Your willingness to disappear is. Your belief that you must be everything for everyone is the thing that has been stealing your life. And once you see that, you can no longer pretend it isn't true. So choose yourself. Not in a selfish way, but in a necessary way. Choose yourself the way you would choose a person you love. With care, with respect, with protection. Because you are that person. You are worth the fight. You are worth the discomfort. You are worth the change. And once you fully step into that, your kindness becomes a force, not a sacrifice. A power. A light that doesn't dim itself to make others comfortable. A light that shines with strength, clarity, and truth. You can feel it now. The shift. The way your chest holds itself differently. The way your thoughts stop circling like a trapped animal. This is what happens when you stop living to be approved. When you stop shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. You begin to understand that your life is not a service. It is not a performance. It is yours. And the moment you claim it, everything changes. You may still be kind, but your kindness is no longer a bargaining chip. It's a choice, a powerful one. You give because you want to, not because you're afraid of being rejected. You help because you're capable, not because you're obligated. You listen because you care, not because you're trying to earn love. That difference is huge. It's the difference between being alive and merely existing. And that's why the stakes are rising. Because the world will try to pull you back into the old story. It will test your new boundaries like they're a threat. People will ask for favors without considering your limits. People will act surprised when you say no. People will try to guilt you into the same old patterns. And if you let them, you will slip right back into the life that drained you. But you don't have to, not anymore. You've already seen what happens when you give too much. You felt the cost. You felt the exhaustion. You felt the resentment that, hi, there's behind a smile. You've watched yourself disappear slowly, and you've realized that disappearing is not kindness. It is self-erasure. Now you know the truth. The truth that no one tells you because it sounds too harsh. The truth that kindness without boundaries is not noble. It is dangerous. It is a weakness that gets exploited. It is a door left open for people who don't deserve to enter your life. So you begin to choose differently. Not with drama, not with rage, with quiet strength. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for having needs. You stop rushing to fix other people's emotions. You stop taking responsibility for what isn't yours. You stop giving away your energy like it's unlimited. And when you do that, you'll notice something unexpected. You'll start to attract people who treat you like a person, not a resource. People who respect your time. People who respect your boundaries. People who understand that kindness is not a contract. It's a gift that is no. Meant to be abused. This is where your life becomes a filter, where the people who belong rise to the surface and the people who don't fall away. It's painful, yes, because you lose the comfort of being needed. You lose the familiar roles that made you feel safe. You lose the illusion that your worth depends on how much you sacrifice. But you gain something far greater. You gain yourself. You gain peace. You gain clarity. You gain the kind of strength that doesn't require approval to exist. You gain a life where your kindness is not a weakness, but a choice you make freely, without fear. You might wonder if this is selfish. You might wonder if you're becoming someone you don't recognize. But this is not a transformation into cruelty. It is a transformation into truth. The truth that you are not here to be used. The truth that you deserve to be treated with respect. The truth that your life matters. And now the urgency becomes undeniable, because every day you delay, the old pattern grows stronger. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you teach yourself that your voice doesn't matter. Every time you sacrifice your peace for someone else's comfort, you reinforce the belief that your needs are optional. You don't have to wait until you're broken. You don't have to wait until you're completely drained. You don't have to wait for a crisis to force the change. The change begins right now, in the way you speak to yourself, in the way you stand in your own life, in the way you refuse to disappear. This is the moment where your kindness becomes a force, not a burden. Not a weakness, a power that is rooted in self-respect, a power that cannot be taken away, a power that makes you unbreakable. So choose yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a necessary way. Choose yourself the way you would choose someone you love, with protection, with care, with boundaries. Because you are that person. You are worth the fight. You are worth the discomfort. You are worth the change. A-N-D. Once you step into that, your life begins to change. Your energy returns, your relationships shift, your peace deepens. You stop living on borrowed strength. You start living in alignment. And in that alignment, your kindness becomes a light that doesn't dim itself to make others comfortable. A light that shines with strength, clarity, and truth. You can feel it now. The moment when you realize you're not just changing your behavior, you're changing your life. That shift doesn't happen softly. It happens like a door slamming shut on the past. And when it slams, you hear the echo of every time you gave too much and got nothing in return. You hear the silence that followed your sacrifice. You hear the cost you paid in private. And you understand with sudden clarity that you were never meant to carry that weight. This is the truth no one tells you. Being kind is not the problem. Being kind is a gift. The problem is when your kindness becomes your identity. When you confuse giving with worth. When you believe your value is measured by how much you can tolerate. When you think love is a test you must pass by enduring. That belief is what makes you vulnerable. It's what makes you a target. It's what makes you disappear. And now you're awake. You see the pattern. You see how you were trained to accept discomfort as proof of goodness. You see how you were praised for being easy. You see how people rewarded you for being quiet. You see how your boundaries were treated like inconveniences. And you realize the most dangerous thing about being too kind is that it can turn into a life sentence. Because kindness without limits doesn't just drain you. It teaches you to accept less. It teaches you to settle. It teaches you to tolerate disrespect. It teaches you to believe you don't deserve better. And the longer you live like that, the more your soul shrinks. Not in a dramatic way. In a slow, invisible way, like water disappearing from a cup you never stopped drinking from. You may think you can keep going. You may think you can keep giving. You may think you can keep being the person everyone relies on. But there is a point where your body stops cooperating, your mind stops believing, your heart stops trusting, and you begin to feel something you've never wanted to feel, emptiness. A hollow space where your joy used to be, a quiet ache that no amount of helping can fill. That is the wake-up call, not a crisis, not a breakdown. A quiet realization that your life has been on loan to everyone else. And the worst part is, You let it happen because you thought it was love, because you believed that being kind meant never asking for anything in return, because you thought boundaries were selfish, because you were afraid of being seen as difficult, but now you know better. Boundaries are not selfish. They are the framework that protects your kindness from being exploited. They are the lines that keep your heart safe. They are the proof that you believe you matter. And once you start drawing them, you begin to rebuild the relationship you have with yourself. You begin to speak differently, not louder, not angrily, just clearly. You stop over-explaining your choices. You stop justifying your limits. You stop begging for permission to be treated with respect. You begin to let your yes mean yes, and your no mean no. You begin to stop apologizing for existing, and when you do, something happens that will scare you. People will test you. People will push. People will try to guilt you. Because they've been living off your compliance for so long, they don't know what to do when you stop offering it. Their discomfort is not your problem. Their reaction is not proof that you're wrong. It's proof that you're no longer available for their emotional theft. Some people will leave, some will distance themselves, some will act like you become unrecognizable. That will hurt, it will sting, because you still care, because you still want connection. But this is the point where you learn the difference between connection and consumption. You learn that not everyone who loves you deserves you. You learn that some relationships only exist because you were willing to disappear. And you realize that's not love. That's a pattern, a loop, a trap, and you decide you're done living in it. This is the moment your life becomes real. Not easier, not perfect, but real. You start choosing yourself with the same intensity you use to choose others. You start protecting your energy like it matters. Because it does. Your time matters. Your peace matters. Your joy matters. Your life matters. You don't have to become unkind to be safe. You just have to become honest. You just have to become selective. You just have to become brave enough to say no without shrinking. You just have to stop treating your own needs like they are an inconvenience. You were never meant to be a martyr. You were meant to be a whole person, a person who can love without losing themselves. A person who can give without bleeding. A person who can be kind without being a door left open for anyone to walk through. And now that you see the cost, you can choose something else. You can choose a life where your kindness is powerful, not painful. Where your heart is open, but not vulnerable to everyone. Where your generosity is intentional, not automatic. Where your love is not a sacrifice, but a gift. This is the new story. The one where you are not lost in your own goodness. The one where you are kind and you are strong and you are whole. And you finally understand that the greatest act of kindness you can offer the world is the one you give yourself. You can feel the shift now. It's not a feeling of relief. It's a feeling of awakening. Like you've been living with your eyes half closed, and suddenly you can see the edges of your own life. You see how much of it was built around other people's comfort. You see how often you traded your peace for approval. You see how, man, the times you smiled when your heart was screaming. That clarity is not gentle, but it is necessary. Because once you see it, you can't ignore it. You can't pretend it wasn't real. You can't go back to living like your needs don't matter. The truth is, you were never meant to be the person who always gives and never receives. You were never meant to be the person who carries everyone else's weight while your own breaks. You were meant to be whole. And now you know that whole is not a luxury. It's a requirement. This is where the urgency becomes undeniable. Not because you're in danger, but because your life is slipping through your fingers. Every time you give away your energy, you lose a piece of your future. Every time you stay quiet, you lose a piece of your voice. Every time you sacrifice your needs, you lose a piece of your soul. And the longer you allow that to happen, the harder it becomes to recover. The old patterns will try to pull you back. They will come in soft disguises. A familiar request, a familiar guilt trip, a familiar line that makes you feel responsible. The voice in your head will whisper that you're being selfish, that you're overreacting, that you're not allowed to change, that if you stop being the person everyone relies on, you'll lose them, that if you choose yourself, you'll be alone. But here is the truth you need to hear. Being alone is not the same as being unsupported. Sometimes being alone is the first step toward being surrounded by the right people. Sometimes being alone is the moment you finally stop asking the wrong people to stay. Sometimes being alone is the proof that you're no longer willing to live on other people's terms. You are not a burden because you have limits. You are not unlovable because you say no. You are not cruel because you protect your peace. You are not weak because you refuse to disappear. You are simply human. And humans need boundaries. Humans need respect. Humans need reciprocity. Humans need a life that Tea doesn't demand their soul as payment. This is not a call to become harsh. It's a call to become honest. You can still be kind. You can still be generous. You can still care deeply. Your care must come from choice, not fear. Your generosity must come from abundance, not depletion. Your love must come from strength, not self-erasure. That is the difference between being kind and being consumed, and the world will notice. Not because you announce it, because your energy changes. People will sense it. Some will be drawn to it.